Thank you, Julie. I am Guy Tardieu, Ozac CEO. Pleased to welcome you. Let me introduce Ozac for the beginning. So Ozac, in French, Organisme de Sécurité de l'Aviation Civile, is very special in a way because on the one hand, it's a private company, subsidiary of the APAF Group. And on the other hand, we are authorized by a ministerial decree since 2010 to drive initial, continuing worthiness oversight of French civil aviation with respect to EASA regulations. As part of the authority, Ozac issues, oversees, suspends, or withdraws approvals for training, production, maintenance, and continuing airworthiness management organization. We also issue airworthiness documents for aircraft and aviation mechanics licenses. Some figures just to illustrate our activity. There are around 12,000 aircraft registered in France. There are also around 12,000 aeronautical mechanics licenses that are still valid, 950 organizations that are overseen, and 560 technical documents are written, procedures, guides, bulletins, and are available on the Ozac's website. As you may know, Airworthiness Oversight had to cope last year with a big step forward, RBO, risk-based oversight. That will be the main issue of this webinar. Some 4 years ago, Ozac has decided to develop dedicated processes and information system supports to manage this important step. This package helps the decision-making process. It gathers the relevant data, manages them, and drive analysis in order to provide a dedicated dashboard. These elements will give the opportunity to adapt the worthiness oversight cycles in conjunction with the risk profile of each entity to cope with the new regulation. RBO's oversight program is set to progressively be applicable to all concerned entities and will be helpful to select aircraft for the ACAM program. In the first phase, the RBO's oversight program is set for Part CAMO entities, for those who are familiar with the regulation. And in 2022, it will be extended to Part 21G and Part 145 entities. As we manage to proceed with the first phase, typically through dedicated working sessions with business unions, we have decided for the second phase, so the Part 21G and the Part 415 entities, to put together similar kind of working sessions with industrial and maintenance units in order to share the relevant parameters and perspective of the processes. Regarding RBO's oversight program set for aircraft, as previously mentioned, Ozac has developed a process and a dedicated support in order to make sure the sampling process to select the aircraft is relevant. So the processes and information system package performance is mainly guaranteed by the way they have been developed and the relevant operating modes. This package has been set through a partnership with business experts from Ozac, Research and Development Department, and including Clément Dufix, who will have a presentation right away, along with artificial intelligence specialists, data scientists from C+7, or 6x7 in English. Erwan, Prud'homme, CEO of C+7, will also make a presentation tonight. So I've tried to be very brief, and I will give the floor to Clément and Erwan and wish you a very good evening for everyone. I don't know if Clément start or Erwan. It's Clément's time. Okay, Clément, go on, please.
All right, let me just. Hope you can see and hear me, everyone. Erwan, can you confirm? And can you confirm that you see my screen, Erwan?
Oui.
All right, perfect. So good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Tardieu, for that introduction. Our subject tonight is risk and performance-based oversight in civil aviation. This is quite a complex subject. We have 1 hour and a half to go through this, which is part of the challenge tonight. And to start on the good base, we go with you quickly through our main objectives and through the content of tonight's presentations. We have two main objectives for you tonight. The first one is to give you an overview of our approach on how we wish to implement and how we implement risk-based oversight techniques in civil aviation, of course. The audience is quite large tonight, so one of the main challenges for me and Erwan is to be clear for people which are discovering the subject and to let the people that are already experts in that subject to learn new things. So my challenge will be with Erwan to address all that huge audience, which will be a pleasure, of course. So first objective, give you an overview of our approach and to show you how it works, practically speaking also. And the second objective is to demystify data science, which is a huge mission too. This one belongs to Erwan, and we'll have 10 minutes to do this. So quite a huge challenge, but the idea is to show you how data science, artificial intelligence can be used in those risk-based oversight methods and techniques. Regarding the content, we got three phases in our presentations. The first one will be focused on the basic principles and on the theoretical approach applied to a given organization. We've selected the continuing airworthiness management organization, but that approach can be used anywhere risk-based oversight is required. So even if we use CAMO, Continuing Airworthiness Management Organization, as an example for tonight's presentation, as mentioned by our president, Mr. Tardieu, we'll have to do the same thing on Part 21G, production, and Part 145, maintenance, and the same approach, the same principle will apply. Second part, the artificial intelligence and data science part. This will be presented by Erwan. And finally, at the end of our evening, I will try to show you how we turn this theory into practice through the development of a piece of software, which is at the prototype stage, at this stage, to turn into practice what I will present during the first part and what will be presented by Erwan also. Two things to keep in mind. First of all, what we have developed is there to suit French expectations and French environment. RBO is something that every national aviation authority within Europe is required to implement. And of course, depending on your country, the number of aircraft you have, the number of approved organization you are overseeing, the depth, the complexity of the system may vary. In our opinion, the principles should remain the same, but the level of complexity, the number of indicators, etc., may vary from one country to another, even if the basic principles remain the same. So this is important for, if we have in the audience people from NAAs, don't worry if it seems too complex. Only the principles are important. The complexity then can be adapted to your context. Second important thing before we start, we will have a question and answer session at the end of the conference, so at the end of the part 3, after the practical implementation. We will see how much time we have to address your questions. So feel free to write down your questions through the chat all along the presentation. During the entire conference, you can write questions in the chat. And at the end, we will select some of them and answer some of them live, me and Erwan. And for the one that we can't answer because we are running out of time, we will address them through written answers later this week or next week when we will find the time to do it. So again, feel free to ask all the questions you have during the presentation through the chat, and we will address them at the end. All right, let's start first with the description of the basic principles. What I want to do first is to speak about that word, the word oversight, which is in the title of the slide here. What do we mean by oversight? And to understand in what way the RBO is a game changer regarding oversight, we first need to have a quick overview of what is conventional oversight. What is the oversight without RBO? So I will do that with only one quick slide. What you already know, or what you should keep in mind, is that in Europe, in the European civil aviation system, if you want to do something like design an aircraft, produce an aircraft, maintain an aircraft, manage the continuing airworthiness of an aircraft, or even operate an aircraft, most of the case, you will need an approval delivered by a competent authority. So to get that approval, you will apply, and the competent authority will assess through what we call an initial investigation.
On avait quitté aussi vers... on faisait une décision pour le DI.
Can you turn off the mic?
19 moins.
So the competent authority will assess your compliance through the initial investigation process. And once you've demonstrated to the competent authority that you comply to all the requirements associated to the approval for which you've applied, the competent authority will issue an approval. But that's just the beginning of the journey. In conventional oversight, all NAs are required to check that each organization is completely audited at periods not exceeding 24 months. This means that once you have your approval, the competent authority will set oversight cycles, the duration of which cannot exceed 24 months. And this is, as long as you got your approval, we will do those oversight cycles one after another. So at the end of the first 24 months, we will see if you are compliant or not, and we will maintain or not your approval, and we will go for another 24-month period in which we will check through mainly on-site audits. This is what we do in conventional oversight, mainly on-site audits, if you still comply with the applicable requirements. So this is conventional oversight. Conventional, I've invented that term. It's just for us to understand tonight what are the game changers when we speak when it's about when we introduce RBO, because you will see that slide at the end with the RBO to see what is changed. Something else to keep in mind for those who don't know, when something is not compliant during the initial investigation or during the oversight cycles, we issue what we call a finding, and we have different finding levels. Mainly two levels. Level 1 are for the most critical findings. When there is a direct impact on safety, you got a level 1. And this means that we have this has a direct effect on your approval. So these are level 1 findings, and we have level 2 findings. We can find level 3 in some regulation like production, for example, but just keep in mind for your understanding for the rest of the conference that we raise findings and we are mainly addressing two levels of findings, level 1 and level 2. And those findings are raised during the oversight when non-compliance is spotted by the competent authority. All right, so that's conventional oversight. And keep in mind that sentence at the bottom, each organization should be completely audited at periods not exceeding 24 months. This will change with RBO. So now let's jump from conventional to risk-based oversight. To do this, let's have a look through the regulation. What states the regulation regarding the oversight program compared to what we've seen through the conventional oversight? This is the first thing that is new in the current regulation. This example comes from Part CAMO, which is the EU regulation applicable to continuing and authors management organizations. And it states that the oversight program shall be developed taking into account the specific nature of the organization, the complexity of its activities, the results of past certification and oversight activities, and should be based on the assessment of associated risks. So it's a bit more complex than what we have on the conventional oversight, where I was just required to do on-site audits, mainly on-site audits on a period not exceeding 24 months, and then I do it again. Here, the content of my oversight program should be based on those aspects and should be derived from an assessment of the associated risks. So that's the first point, and this is what we will call in the rest of the presentation the what. What do I have to do in my oversight program, during my oversight program? What will be the depth of the oversight? What will be the content of the program? So this first point addresses the what. Second novelty, the oversight planning cycle may be extended, meaning that we are not stuck with 24 months periods with RBO. We can go up to 48 months, which is something we are not addressing at this stage, but we can also go to 36 months. So the length of your oversight cycle is no longer at 24 months as a maximum. You can go to 36 and even 48. So this is the second novelty. And this second point is our when. So what do I have to do as part of my oversight program, and when do I have to do? How many time I have to do it before repeating it again? So these are the two questions we will answer through the theoretical approach in that first part of the conference. So let's start with the first one, the what. Before going into the details, what this means, 1 and 2, it means that compared to the conventional oversight, to design my oversight program, I will use something new we've called organization's risk profile. So we have to use a new tool, which will be used to answer those 2 points, those 2 requirements, to give us what I have to do and when I have to do it through what we've called organization's risk profiles. 2 major points here. Doing RBO, in our opinion, does not mean that we are no longer doing compliance-based oversight. The RBO is not there to replace the compliance check. It's just an additional layer to give you the opportunity to do your compliance check in a smarter way, in a clever way, but it's still compliance. At the end, RBO is not meant to remove oversight activities. You can change the deepness, you can change the method you will implement to check the compliance, but at the end, when the oversight cycle is finished, the competent authority is still required, even if you are doing RBO, to check the compliance of every applicable requirement. So the RBO is just there to modulate the deepness of the oversight and the length of the cycle and to better allocate your resources, but it does not replace the compliance check. So that's the first very important point. Second important point, at this stage, we are all learning and gaining experience on those tools. So it's clear for us and it's clear in our processes that at this stage, those tools are only to be used as decision aid tools. It's not there to dictate what you have to do. At the end of the day, reading through the risk profile, the inspector has the last word. He decides based on the data he has. If he wants to do something quite different from what you have, what is suggesting the risk profile, it's up to him. He's still allowed to do it because we still have to gain experience on those processes and on those approaches. All right, so let's address the first point now. How will we answer that requirement? First question here, the risk. We have to address and assess a risk, which is something new. And the first important question is to define the risk we want to address, because risk can mean lots of things. And here we're doing RBO, so we need to be clear on the risk we are addressing. To answer that question, we went through ICAO standards, and we found a definition of a risk in the ICAO standards that you probably all know. And the ICAO defines the risk as the projected likelihood and severity of the consequence or outcome of an existing hazard or situation. So first thing here, okay, but which situation am I addressing here? My mission as a competent authority is to check if the organization is compliant or not. So the risk I will address through the RBO is the risk of non-compliance to a given organization. So what is the likelihood of a non-compliance and what will be the severity of that non-compliance for a given organization? And that's my risk and the only risk I will address through RBO as a competent authority. So this is the first thing to keep in mind for tonight. The risk which is addressed is the risk of non-compliance within a given organization. Likelihood, severity, here is the risk. So the risk is the crossing of those two notions, the likelihood and the severity, the probability. The higher is the probability of the non-compliance, and the higher is the severity of the non-compliance, the higher is the risk. Okay, you all know that logic. So this is the matrix from ICAO, and we will apply that logic. The problem here is that ICAO is speaking about probability, likelihood, and severity, but not the agency, EASA. When you read the EASA regulation, the point 1 on my slide, we are talking about nature, complexity, past oversight, assessment of risks, but we are not talking about probability and severity. So we had to find a way to create links between the ICAO definition and the EU requirements. And this is how we did it. First thing, we replace the probability with a performance factor. So instead of speaking of probability of non-compliance, we will evaluate the performance of the organization. The idea behind this is to say that the higher the performance of the organization, the lower the probability of a non-compliance. So it's the same logic. We are addressing the same issue, but the performance is inversely proportional to the probability. But at the end of the day, the performance is a way to address the probability of non-compliance. And this is why in RBO, you most of the time have a P between the R and the B. This is why we have risk and performance-based oversight, because at the end of the day, when you are addressing a risk of non-compliance, the probability is most of the time replaced by the performance. So that's a way to, of course, score the performance of the organization and to take into account the past oversight, your statistics in terms of compliance. Trick number 2, the severity. We've replaced the severity by a complexity factor. The idea is the following. Let's imagine that I'm a continuing airworthiness management organization managing 10 aircrafts. Okay. And so that's KMO A. KMO B is managing the same type of aircraft, but got 200 aircrafts under its management. So KMO B is more complex. The idea behind the complexity attached to the severity is that a non-compliance in KMO A potentially affects 10 aircrafts. That same non-compliance in KMO B potentially affects 200 aircrafts. So the more complex you are, the higher the severity. So we've replaced the severity by the complexity, and the complexity is a way to take into account the specific nature of the organization, the number of aircraft you manage, are you subcontracting tasks, what are your privileges, etc. The nature is taken into account through the complexity factor. And of course, it's in the name of the indicator, the complexity of the activities. So those tricks, replacing the probability with the performance and the severity with the complexity, is a way to apply the ICAO definition with direct links with the EU regulation. Because now I can speak about performance, past oversight, nature, complexity, and risk assessment as required by the EU regulation. All right, so when you're able to score the performance and the complexity of each organization, you can draft a map, a risk map, with a low risk area and an high risk area, and you got your clouds of organization, one organization on that map. Okay, the problem here is that this does not answer the what. This does not give me, it does not give me what do I do for the high risk organizations and what do I do for the low risk organizations. It's not detailed enough to tell me as an inspector what I have to do as part of my oversight program. So we've decided to go deeper and further, and we've replaced the performance factor, which is in that map unique to the organization. We have one measurement of performance per organization, to a bunch of performance factors. So we are not only measuring the performance globally at the organization level, but we are measuring it in each areas the organization is working, in each of its activities. So we've divided the regulation into 18 areas, and we've divided the Part KMO and the continuing airworthiness management activities into 18 areas, which are groupments of articles from the regulation. And we are doing a performance measurement in each area. For example, we will calculate and generate your performance in the airworthiness review domain or in the records keeping domain, etc., etc. So we are moving from one measurement to a series of measurements to generate that graph, which is more or less a performance graph, which is, let's say, generated for each of the organization under our oversight. To do that, and I will give you some details and an example in a minute, we use about 40 performance criteria. Some of them are focused on the compliance, others go beyond compliance. I will describe that in the next slide. And this is a way you will see how to help the inspector to take decisions on what to do regarding the deepness of the oversight in each of the area that are addressed by that graph. So how do we do this? How do we move from one global performance measurement to a performance in a given area. As I said, we use two sets of indicators. The first set, we've called it conformity performance indicators. They can apply to the entire organization, and they are focused on your compliance statistics. It's the result of the past oversight that we have to address in the EU regulation. It's not less, not more than statistics on your compliance. So we are looking at your number of findings divided by the oversight time. We are checking if you close your finding on time. Do you ask for extension? Do you have recurrent findings, etc., etc. So these indicators are focused on your compliance. The first thing we do is that we derive from the conformity performance indicators the one which applies to the area. The area is a bunch of articles that we have identified in the regulation. So any findings raised on that article will be attached to area X. Okay, so that's a way to measure, to evaluate the performance in that particular area. But in our opinion, performance cannot only be based on compliance. It's not because you comply that you are not necessarily performant. So we've decided to add to the system what we've called area-specific performance indicators. And those indicators are specific to the area and they go beyond compliance. We are not measuring compliance with those indicators. We are measuring performance and effectiveness of the process. And I will give you an example. When you add those two sets of indicators, you got a measurement of your performance in area X, which is made of indicators addressing your compliance, and an additional layer to refine the measurement based on indicators that are purely addressing your performance and your effectiveness and not your compliance. Let me give you an example with one domain which is, let's say, applicable to every organization. It's record keeping. So how does that work in the record keeping domain? First thing we have to do is to select in the regulation all the requirements applying to the organization related to record keeping. So if we do that for a continuing airworthiness management organization, this is what we got. So we got organizational requirements, part KMO A220 contains requirements regarding the record keeping. And we also have technical requirements. These are the aircraft records in part M and part M light. So when you add those two columns, you got the group of articles which is composing area records keeping in the risk profile of the organization. First thing, your compliance performance indicators. Every time a finding will be raised on those articles, it will be captured as a statistic used to generate your compliance performance on the records keeping area. So this is a way to answer the first step, the compliance performance, only by grouping the articles and isolating the statistics regarding your compliance on those articles, you got your performance in terms of compliance in that area, records keeping. And then we add area-specific indicators. So those indicators go beyond the compliance, and they are here to address the effectiveness and the real performance of your process. So let's imagine that you're compliant regarding records keeping. At the end of the audit, or at the end of the compliance check, which is not necessarily an on-site audit, we will speak about this later, the inspector will have to answer a bunch of area-specific performance indicators, which are scored on a 3-level scale from 0 to 3. And in that case, if during the audit, the inspector had to check and to access recorded documents, it will check if it was easy or not to access those documents. So the level 0 here is when it takes systematically a long time with a huge impact on the audit to access recorded documents. Level 1 is a bit better, level 2 is even better, and level 3 is the best we can expect regarding records keeping, meaning access to recorded documents is always immediate. So at the end of the audit, these questions, this records keeping performance will be recorded by the inspector, which is something new. And this is where we are recording in our system information that goes beyond compliance. Because even if you are at level 0 here, you are not necessarily non-compliant. If you are non-compliant, we raise a finding, and then that finding is captured as part of the conformity performance indicators. If there's no finding, you can be no finding level 0 or no finding level 3 on that area specific performance indicators. Okay. This is also a way to capture what is always, well, what is most of the time called the inspector feedback and feeling about the organization. Those area specific performance indicators are there to capture the feeling and to capture what was seen by the inspector, which is not necessarily related to compliance. Okay, if you are still alive, we can continue. This graph is addressing only performance. But remember, to address the risk, I need to add complexity to the game, okay? I cannot speak about risk without crossing performance with complexity. So I need to add complexity to that graph. Things are easier here. We have to, yeah, okay, so risk is a performance by complexity. So how do we do this? We use 11 criteria to score your complexity. So your complexity is one single value. It's not area specific. It's global to the organization. So it's a constant value. We will put, we will add to the graph to cross it with the performance. Around that value, which is derived from the aggregation of those 11 complexity criteria, we will derive two thresholds. Okay, we will define two thresholds, a high one and a low one. And when we do this, on that graph, we've defined three different areas, a low area, a medium area, and a high area. And these are going to be our three risk zones, okay? And this is how it works. Risk being performance per complexity, in the area which is at the bottom of the graph, where the performance is the lowest, will be our high risk area. So for example, in that case, regarding contractors and subcontractors, the performance is in the high risk area, meaning that the system will suggest the inspector to apply in-depth oversight in that area. Okay. In the medium one, for example, reliability program, in my example here, the performance sits in the medium area, the medium risk area. So I will suggest to apply just a normal oversight. So I think you get it now. At the top of the graph, we got the low risk area where the performance is the highest. It's the case, for example, here for the, let's say, airworthiness review area. The performance is in the low risk area. So in that low risk area, the system will suggest to reduce the deepness of the oversight. I think you all got the principle. Just to show you the logic behind this and to come back to the ICAO matrix to show you that it works exactly the same way as the ICAO matrix. Let's imagine that my complexity is not moving, but my performance in the means of compliance area is increased. I increase my performance. I move from the high risk to the medium risk. Performance is increased. Deepness of the oversight is decreased because the risk is decreased. Okay. On the contrary, if the performance remains constant, but the complexity is decreasing, the two threshold will go down. And for the same value of performance, because the complexity is reduced, the risk is reduced, and then the deepness of the oversight can be reduced. For example, in the means of compliance, we've moved from high to medium just because the complexity has gone is lower. Okay, and on the contrary, if the complexity goes up, I can move from low to medium or to medium to high because the risk is increased by the fact that my complexity is increased. So the logic behind this is exactly the same as the ICAO matrix, except that we are speaking about performance, not probability, and the performance is inversely proportional to the probability. And we are speaking about complexity instead of severity. Apart from that, it's exactly the same logic. All right, we've answered the what. What do I have to do? When I got such a graph, I know the deepness of the oversight I will have to apply in each of the area for the coming oversight cycle. Now I need to answer the when. What will be the length of the oversight cycle? How long will I have to planify, to schedule, and to do all those checks during the as part of the oversight cycle? This is the second question. I will be very quick on that one during that first part of the conference, and I will come back to this at the end during the third part. The when is quite well regulated directly in the regulation, because the regulation states that by default, your oversight cycle cannot exceed 24 months, like in conventional oversight. But then, and here is the novelty, if during the previous 24 months, you've demonstrated to the competent authority that you got an effective identification of safety hazards and an effective management of associated risk, plus a full control over all changes within your organization, plus no level 1 findings issued, and finally, your corrective actions are implemented in due time. If you can demonstrate this during the previous 24 months, the regulation allows you, makes you eligible for 26 cycle length, 36 months, sorry, 36 months oversight program cycle length. What's interesting here is that 3 of those 4 requirements are directly linked with the maturity of your management system. So this is where we will use a tool. Well, we have developed a tool based on a tool published by the agency in 2017, which is called Management System Assessment Tool, to answer these questions, the maturity of your management system. And I will go through it briefly at the end of the conference, not right now. But believe me, it will answer the when, the length of the oversight cycle. Then at the end, the risk profile of the organization is made of 2 tools. The first one is the one I've presented in detail in my presentation to define the what do I have to do, the deepness of the oversight. And the second one is the management system assessment tool that I will describe later to answer the when. So when we add those 2, we know what to do and when to do it, and we address the EU regulation applying ICAO definition of a risk, keeping in mind that the risk which is addressed is the risk of non-compliance. All right, so to conclude on that first part, this was conventional oversight cycle, 24 months, and we do it again. With RBO, I got 2 new levers. The first one is the length of the oversight cycle. The first one will be 24. We need to gather data to take a decision to know if you will change something after the first 24 months. And if possible, if you comply with what you have to comply to be eligible to a 36 month, we can expand and extend the oversight cycle to 36 and even to 48, not addressed at this stage. So first lever, we can extend the length of the oversight cycle. And second lever, we can formally vary the deepness of the oversight depending on the area which is for which the compliance check is performed. So I can have areas, which is the case for area 1 here, where the oversight will be reduced, not removed. As said at the beginning, we are not allowed through RBO to remove compliance check. We still have to do it. We can change the way we do it, but we still have to do it. So I will have area with a reduced oversight, others with a normal oversight, and some of them with in-depth oversight, depending on the risk level identified in the risk profile. All right, now I will hand over to Erwan, because we have the what, we have the when, but we still need to address the how we will turn that theory into practice. And to do this, we have designed a decision aid tool, and to do so, we've relied on data scientists and artificial intelligence, all those things that Erwan is better than me to explain. So I will hand over to Erwan and see you later after Erwan's presentation to show you the results of our common work with Erwan.
Thank you, Clément. And let me, okay, normally I should be able to share my,
Here we are.
My screen. Hello to everyone. I'm Erwan Prud'homme, and I run a company's name C4set, 6x7 in English. And we are expert in data science. And the main idea of this presentation will be to explain you in 10 minutes. So it will be quite tricky, but I will try to give you some clue of what is data science and artificial intelligence, how we deployed a project using data science to answer goal of RBO in OSAC, and two of you things to know how to succeed on artificial intelligence project. Our playground, our playground is this. It's a data life cycle, and we are expert on data. And the first part of our business is to know how to extract, transform, and store all the data, whatever the kind of data it is. So it can be, of course, DBMS, but also image, sound, text, video, or whatever. And the main issue for that part is to store and to collect the data in a way that they can be used after to answer some question. But the main issue first is to deal with the quality control, because when you mix data from different parts, it's the best way to know and to figure out some quality issue of the data you collect. When you have all the data stored in the same place and it's ready to be analyzed, the first step is we call this data visualization, which means that you begin to just do some statistic, really low one, not artificial intelligence, but descriptive statistics, to learn the data, to see if there is any correlation between the data, between them. And this is really the first part. And as soon as you learn all what you were able to do or to learn, you can now move on to artificial intelligence and machine learning. To explain what is artificial intelligence or machine learning, it will need, I think, at least 2 hours, and I'm not sure that it will be complete, but machine learning is a way of, instead of using some description to understand a problem, you will try to make the machine learn as a child. So it's quite tricky, but normally it works, and you use algorithm to do this. Sorry. And then when you have all those parts, you can have a business tool, because it's the first part of every project like this is there is a business need or business issue to solve. So in the RBO part and the OSAC project, the first part was to store the data. And the first tool we used to store the data was the Safety Oversight Management System. So the name is MPIC, and which was all the past certification we kept. And the second, we use also open data, like financial information or incident reports or this kind of stuff. All those data are stored in the same place, and then we can do some quality control and store the data months after months to have some historical and past review all those data. As I've said, you have to first understand your data, so we use data visualization to understand what we have, what kind of data we got. And then we can now use artificial intelligence. We use two kind of AA. The first one was to score, to estimate the risk. And the second part is NLP, natural language processing. It helps us to transform reports into knowledge and into information that we can use in algorithm. And then we get the data viz and cockpit to manage and monitor the oversight plan that Clément will show you after. So the idea of the tool was to have one tool to define and monitor the oversight program and to select all the information, and that's it. And the other part to have also a KPI dashboard to monitor exactly all the domain and the risk related to those domains, as explained by Clément. 4 steps. The first one for this project, it was in 4 steps, but most of the AI projects are in those 4 steps. The first one is to define and calculate the KPI. You have to build this with a team that is built with business experts, like all the squad of OSAC, and also a scientist expert like the one in 6x7 CIFRASET. It's always a team that you have to build to understand all the KPI you need to answer the business issue you have to solve. The second part, you can imagine that we will, for example, mix some data like financial data in euro and some number of figures like the weight of an aircraft, for example, if it's only for aircraft. And the third one, like the type of aircraft or the type of camo. And all those kind of data are absolutely not the same. It's like in French, we have an expression which is mixing cabbage and carrots. It's exactly the same in data. So we have to use some recipe, like to do a soup, but to mix the data all together and to standardize and aggregate all the KPI. It's a mandatory part of all those kind of work. Then, as soon as you get all the KPI, you have also a budget allocation process to run. This process is that you have to weight all the indicator to give them a weight more than the other regarding the risk, regarding the environment you are working on. And then you can, at this time, create your RBO program and tools and be able to select and focus inspection based on the highest risk. This methodology is used for all AI projects for calculating the risk. Few milestones to succeed a project like this. The first one is to build a data science and business expert team. Both are needed and mandatory. If you have only business expert or only data scientist expert, it won't work. You really need to bring them in the same team, and then that every part of the team speaks the same language. The second part is think global and act local. You have to subdivide the project. Otherwise, you will have a tunnel effect and you won't be able to see the end of the tunnel. It's an iterative process. You do one part, then a second, then a third one. At this time, you never underestimate the need of data quality and the control you need to do on that. We have plenty since the last 20 years. We have plenty of examples regarding the quality of the data that our client, our customer thinks they were okay, but they are not. It's really a big important part of the process. And as usual, and I repeat that, but build a team with data scientists and business experts during all the project. Even at the end, it will help on the change management because it's a new tool, it's a new way of thinking the risk. So you need to have everyone in the same boat or act as one team. And then normally at the end, your project is okay. By the way, artificial intelligence is not magic, so you have to avoid the most black box algorithm and funny stuff that are really great in books or literature, but that are not that useful because you cannot explain how the engine is. So that's it. But normally, if you succeed on all those 5 parts, you can have a project that runs like the one in OSAC. So that's it. Thank you for everyone. And Clément, please.
Take back.
All right. Thank you, Erwan. Hope it's okay for everyone. Share my screen again. I hope you can all listen to me. Very important, your last point, Erwan, the black box effect, especially when you're doing RBO. We should keep in mind that we are addressing EU regulation requirements here, and we need to demonstrate that we comply with those requirements. And the black box is definitely not a good solution to demonstrate that you comply with the requirements. You should be able to demonstrate that what you do is under control, and that all your organization are fitted in a fair way. So this was one of a very, very important point to avoid something which looks like a black box at the end. But let me show you the results very quickly. So I will show you the prototype live. The connection is strong enough normally to do so, but because it's live, I have several warnings for you before I go through the software. First thing, it's a prototype. So it means that the interface still needs to be refined. We still have to work on several things. It has been developed to demonstrate that it works using real data. So it's a prototype. And for this reason, it does not contain everything yet. We still need to add several things, and I will tell you what, to the system. And we still have to work on the interface, even if it's not that bad, in my opinion, even if it's a prototype. We are using real data from the French database, but we have changed the approval numbers, of course. So what you will see is real data. It's real organizations approved as a continuing airworthiness management organization, but we have just put dummy numbers for you not to identify the organization we are talking about, and we are depicting the risk profile. So real data, but dummy approval numbers. Of course, it can be quite complex to use and to interpret. So keep in mind that this tool is dedicated, well, is to be used by our inspectors, and the training is needed. So it's normal if it seems a bit complex. We need to be trained to use it properly. I'm sorry, but it's in French. The interface has been designed to be used by French inspectors, even if it's quite easy to put it in English. We've developed it in French, and because it's a prototype, it's only in French at this stage. But you will have to follow me through the interface, and you should understand the most important points and principles. And that's my final warning. It contains lots of information, even if it's not using all what we need to generate a risk profile as per the theoretical approach. It's already full of information. So my advice, if you want to understand something, is to follow me through my speech, because I have to depict live the consequence of depicting the software live is that I cannot hide any information. So I want you to follow my speech for you to understand what's going on my screen. Okay, so let's start. Here we go. So that's the first tab. We got 3 tabs in the prototype. This is tab number 1, and you will see that the more we go in tab number 2, tab number 3, the more the level of details will increase. So that first tab is used to depict the situation at the scale of the country. So that's national view of your organizations depicted on the risk map. So that's the risk map we've seen in the theoretical approach, where we had only one point of measurement for the performance and the complexity. So on that map, we got 1 dot per organization. We got 115 organizations, which is the number of organizations in French which are eligible to a part KMO. And we got our 3 risk zones. First function here, we can depict that map, all areas merged together, so which is the case here, or I can isolate the map on a given area. So for example, continuing airworthiness management, and there I got the same risk map, but only with the area continuing airworthiness management. So the performance levels are here depicted for the organizations, only for one area. It's useful to see in a given area how the whole cloud performs. I will come back to all the areas merged together. We can also depict this with another graph, which is the same thing, but only the dots got the colors now, and we don't have the zones anymore. We can also see the tendency regarding the performance with a color code. For example, the dots which are red there are organizations for which the performance is decreasing, oversight cycle after oversight cycles. When it's green, it's that the performance is increasing. And we can also see only the performance data. And so that graph is the performance levels of each of our organizations, from the lower performance to the best. And same thing for the complexity. And of course, you can select an organization. And if you select it, so that's KMO 101. This is KMO 101 complexity. This is KMO 101 performance. This is KMO 101 on the map with the tendency. So the tendency is not that good. And this is KMO 101 here in the risk map. Okay, so that's the first tab, just to give you an overview of the cloud at national level. Then we move to some more details and we go to tab number 2. This tab number 2 is now focused on one given organization. The one I've selected here is KMO 101. So on that tab, I got the global performance at the top of the tab. So you got the number of findings. Are those findings closed on time? Do you ask for extensions? How does that performance is evolving in time? Do you have recurrent findings? These are your performance factors, all your performance indicators. When we aggregate them, it gives you the performance level, which is 3.7 for that organization. That's the white arrow here. The black arrow here is the average for all organizations. So we see that this one is under the average value. And at the bottom of that page, you got the complexity criteria. So the 11 complexity factors aggregated, it's a 3.1 result for that organization, not far from the average. In the we are close to the black arrow here. And here I got the result for each of the 11 complexity factors. So the interest of this page is to, you know, on tab number 1, that organization was in the high risk area. The interest, the added value of that page is that it gives you a quick overview of why you are in the risk area, in the high risk area. Is it due to your performance? Is it due to your complexity? And if it's due to your performance and or to your complexity, why is your complexity high? Why is your performance low? In that example, we see that the complexity is high due to 3 main factors. The fact that you got an extra privilege here, you have the privilege to perform a worthiness review, and the fact that the number of aircraft you manage and the number of aircraft types you manage is rather high. But this is why you are considered in the high risk area, because you are complex. Type of aircraft you manage is high, the number of types and the number of aircraft you manage is high, and you got extra privileges. If you select a less complex organization, like the 113, look at the indicators, they will turn green. So you see the complexity here. 113 is less complex than 101. Then we got much more red indicators, green indicators, sorry, in the complexity tab, in the complexity area of that tab. And if you select one of our most complex organizations, the number 3, it will turn blue because the complexity is higher for this one. Okay, let's go back to 101 and move to the third and last tab. We are still not addressing the full theory here. We are still missing the no famous graph with the performance in each area and the complexity thresholds. This is the aim of the last tab. So here we go. Here you have the risk profile, a part of the risk profile of KMO 101 with the performance level in each areas, and the 2 black lines you have here are the 2 complexity thresholds I've described during the theoretical approach at the beginning of our conference. So here I can see that the system is suggesting in-depth oversight for the areas that are in dark blue, normal oversight for the areas where we are in light blue, because we are between the 2 thresholds, getting the complexity, and for the other, which are in green, I can reduce the deepness of the oversight. We also have here a comparative view of the same graph. The histogram is your performance. So that's the performance for KMO 101. The blue square is the average performance of everyone. And the green triangle is the highest performance we have. in the database, and the dark blue triangle is the lowest performance we have on our database. So it's a way to see where you fit as an organization compared to the average and compared to the maximum and the minimum. Last view, the tendency. So we can depict the tendency regarding your performance in each area using a color code. Let's go back to the graph used to define the nature of the oversight. When you select an area, like occurrence reporting here, the performance indicators are refreshed to show you your performance data, your compliance statistics in that given area. So that's a way to see why we are in the high risk area in occurrence reporting and why we are not, if I select another one, in the finding management, for example. The two tables we have at the bottom, the one on the lower left corner is used to give you all the statistics, all the data that have been used to generate the performance regarding your compliance. So you've got all the data in that table, which articles the finding was raised, was it level, was it a recurrent findings, etc. We've made that to ensure that the inspector can have in one single place all the information he needs to properly interpret what he is watching. So you got all the details regarding the calculation of the performance in that tab. And in the lower right corner, it's a table which, well, I won't go into details, but it describes the calculation of the tendency. Is the performance increasing? Is the performance constant? Is the performance decreasing? So that's a way to give the inspector further details on why we have this result regarding the performance evolution in time. All right, just to show you that the logic we've seen in the theoretical approach is working in the software. You remember our two organizations, the one that was very, very complex and the one that was very, very simple. If I change here 101 to a very, very complex organization, the number 3, you will see that the two complexity threshold will goes up. You see, so they've gone up, meaning that I will ask more in terms of performance to reduce the oversight compared to a simpler organization, a less complex organization. On the contrary, if I move to the simple one we've used in the previous tab, it was 113, which is a very simple one. Look at the thresholds, they will go down. So they go down, and it's easier to reduce the oversight on that one because the complexity is lower. To conclude on that one, one difference with the theory is also the fact that in the theory, the complexity threshold were straight lines. It's not the case in the software. For complex reasons that I don't have the time to explain, but you can see that the lines used to depict the complexity thresholds are not constant in the software. And this was necessary to ensure that we have a spreading of the organization among the 3 risk zones that was useful for us to better allocate our resources. All right, that's it for the software. So you have certainly noticed that 2 things are missing in that prototype compared to the theory. First thing missing is the area-specific performance indicators. We are only addressing compliance at this stage because to generate them, we need the data, and we are currently gathering the data. The regulation entered into force last year, so we are just at the beginning of the data gathering that will enable us to implement in the software the area-specific performance indicators. And the other thing that is missing is the maturity of the management system. We will add tabs to depict the maturity of the management system because, as I said in the theoretical approach, this maturity is used to answer the when I have to do my checks. So speaking about the when, I will finish my presentation with a quick overview of how do we use the tool to define the when and what does it look like. So let me go back to the slides. Okay, here we go. Here we are. Well, that's done. The role of the management system. So now that I know the what, I need to define the length of the oversight cycle. And as previously explained, it's based, according to the regulation, on the maturity of your management. It's mainly based on the maturity of your management system. So what we've done here is that we've developed a tool which is based on the EASA Management System Assessment Tool, which has been published in 2017, as far as I remember, by EASA. That document is available on the EASA website. And the idea of that document is to give you a tool to evaluate your maturity, the maturity of the 4th ICAO Annex 19 pillars that you probably all know: the safety policy and objective, the safety risk management, and the safety assurance and the safety promotion. So that tool will help you to evaluate your maturity in those 4 pillars. And there is an added one by the agency. As you might notice, Annex 19 address safety management system, while the EU regulation and the tool here address management system, and not only safety management system. In EASA world, the management system is the addition of the 4 ICAO pillars from Annex 19, with some additional items, which are mainly the interfaces and the compliance monitoring function. That's why you got a 5th pillar here, which is in the tool, to address the interface and the compliance monitoring function. And the principle is the following: to be eligible to an extension, to have a 36-month period for your oversight cycle, all your processes, your management system processes, should be operational, and some of them should be more than operational, also effective. And the processes that have to be effective are the hazard identification process, the risk assessment and mitigation process, the management of change process, and the compliance monitoring function. So if those processes are demonstrated effective to the competent authority and all the others are operational, you are eligible to a 36 months oversight period. So now, how do we assess the effectivity? How do we assess the maturity of those various pillars? To do so, it works this way. I will show you an example. We got 22 points of measurement coming from the EASA tool. Again, what we've developed is not a copy-paste of the EASA tool. We use the same principle, but we have refined a bit the tool to make it more usable for our inspectors. But the principle is the following. For each requirement coming from Annex 19 and EU regulation, we need to evaluate your maturity on a 4-level scoring scheme. You probably already know those levels, which are present, suitable, operational, and effective. So the first task will be to evaluate if you are present or not, suitable or not, and operational or not. So in the tool, you got all the provisions required to do your checks and to evaluate if you are P, S, or O. The present is just there to, well, a process will be considered present if it is documented, meaning that you have a procedure addressing the requirements. So if you have a procedure addressing the requirements, you are considered present on the point we are assessing. If you are present, we check if you are suitable. And suitable means that the procedure you have drafted fits your organization. Regarding the complexity of your organization, the nature of your activities, it's adapted and suitable. Of course, we won't ask the same thing regarding risk management, for example, for a very big operator compared to a small company. So this is why we have a suitable evaluation here to check if your process suits your organization. During an initial investigation, when you have applied for an approval and but it's not granted yet, not issued yet, all your processes regarding the management system should be at least present and suitable. So everything should be documented. If it's not the case, we raise a finding, a non-compliance to the point which is assessed. When you are present, suitable, the next step is to check if your process is operational. And operational only means that it's implemented properly. Okay, so if you have a process documented, suitable to your organization, and you can demonstrate through objective evidence that it's implemented properly, then the process is considered operational. When you are approved, so after the initial investigation, during the oversight, all your processes should be present, suitable, and operational. If it's not the case, you will have a finding. So when we are in the oversight phase, after the issuance of the approval, doing that job, meaning determining if you are present, suitable, and or operational, is not more than a compliance check. It's a compliance check. So that's not really new for us as an NA, not really new for the organizations, and not really new for the inspectors. You have a documented process, it fits your organization, and you apply it. This is compliance. So that's why if you are not operational during your when we do the oversight, you will have a finding on the process, which is assessed through the tool. So this is not really new. What comes next is new, because the next step is to evaluate the effectiveness of the process. And this is where we go beyond pure compliance, more or less the same way that we do with our area-specific performance indicators in the theory I've presented at the beginning. So here, once you're operational, we go to the effectiveness part, the effective part, and we have defined several questions you have to ask to given personnel within the organization. Those personnel are identified in the tool. For example, question number 2 here is to be asked to the accountable manager in red and to the nominated post holders in orange. And the inspector will ask those questions and record if the answers are satisfactory or not. And at the end of when all 5 questions have been asked, it will evaluate if the process, which is assessed here, is effective or not. Okay, and record that decision directly in the tool. All right, and you have to do it for all the management system. And as I said previously, if you are operational on everything and effective at least on the processes depicted in purple on my slide, you're eligible to a 36 months oversight period. So that's where we see the clear role and the clear, well, that's why we can't do RBO without management system. And that's why in EU regulations, as long as the EU requirement does not require you to have a management system, we cannot apply RBO, and we do conventional oversight, because we need the management system to answer the when and to define the length of your oversight cycle. All right, what time is it? Okay, I'm done for tonight. Just to conclude, some food for thought for you. We have during 1 hour and a half shown you what we've did for the RBO regarding the oversight of an approved organization, but we have worked with Erwan team on other projects which are also interesting, but we don't have enough time to show everything tonight, but maybe in another meeting, in another conference, we can also show you this, but just for you to think about it, we've also developed a tool which is no longer a prototype, it's used in production now since 2 years now, to help us in aircraft sampling, because as part of the task we have to do as an NA, we do the oversight of organizations, but we also have to manage the airworthiness of the fleet, and we have around 10,000 aircraft registered in France, and we do only several hundreds of inspections each year. So we've developed a tool to select the aircraft which are the best to inspect based on risk. So it's principles that are not far from what we've presented tonight, but slightly different, because we have a selection process at the end and a selection algorithm, which was really interesting to develop. And the second project, which is still in progress, regarding the occurrence reporting. And here we are trying to use artificial intelligence to help us in the analysis of the occurrence reporting we receive as an NA in France. So we receive around 1,000 occurrences each year. Today they are analyzed by safety analysts, and we are developing with the Erwan team a tool to help us in that analysis to let's say do big data analysis to find tendencies, redundancies that the human brain is not necessarily able to find, using artificial intelligence applied to the occurrence reporting. That's it for tonight. Thank you for your attention. Thank you to everyone. As promised at the beginning, we now have a question and answer session. So the idea is that I've received normally a selection of questions that I will try to address. Okay, so I got that's for Erwan. Do you want to start, Erwan, or It's up to you.
As you wish.
I don't care.
Okay.
All right.
There were one question regarding the how many man hours were needed to develop this tool. It's not that easy to answer, but between the first meeting and the first version of the prototype, the delay was less than 6 months. As far as I remember, it was 120 days. So something like that. Less than 6 months. But remember, I've always said that you have to avoid the tunnel effect. So it's a short-term process normally. I hope that I understand the question and it is the answer that you were waiting for. There may be a second question. Tu veux que je fasse les deux? There were also a question regarding the amount of data and the volume regarding the big data issues. The tools we use are one from the market and the other are open source, but both are dealing really well with huge amount of data. And by the way, how to say, airworthiness and aircraft and camo and all those kind of stuff is not as many as the number of customers of a company like LAFNAC. So we deal quite well with the kind of amount of those subjects. It's not big data. It's smart data. It's easy to deal. I think that I answered the two questions, but
well, I got a bunch for me, Erwan, don't worry.
Perfect. Okay,
okay.
I shut my microphone.
So we got four questions. The first one coming from CA UK. How do you limit and or completely remove the subjectivity from the definition of the complexity factor? There are some areas such as instrument flight procedure design where subjectivity is largely part of the discussions between the regulator and flight procedure design service providers. That's a very good point, the problem of the subjectivity. We can't remove subjectivity. We can work on it and make it as objective as possible, but we can't remove subjectivity. I'm not sure that I understand the link with the instrument flight procedure design, etc. Keeping in mind that the risk we are addressing is a risk of non-compliance, I do not see the link with the instrument flight procedure. However, regarding the subjectivity, well, the fact that we've decided to do area-specific performance indicators, for example, is a way to address the subjectivity and the problem of the subjectivity when it comes to record the feedback of the inspectors. Because in most of the systems, the feedbacks is just open questions asked to the inspector or simple questions with rather yes or rather no asked to the inspector. What we've tried to do is to have these 4-level scoring schemes from 0 to 3, each layer describing a precise situation to ensure that when something is perceived as performant, with a good performance by the inspector, it would be the case for any inspector doing the same check and assessing the same objective evidence. So that's one way to remove the subjectivity, but I should confess that it's not possible to remove it completely. As long as human is in the loop, we have subjectivity. Second question from DSAE, do you use occurrence reports? Good points. In the prototype, no, well, not directly. As an approved organization, you have occurrence reporting requirements to comply with. So if you're not compliant with your occurrence reporting processes, or if you're not compliant with the occurrence reporting requirements, you will have findings, and this will be captured through the organization risk profile. But apart from that, at this stage, we're still developing a tool to better, as I said at the end, to better address occurrence reports. And the objective, of course, at the end is to connect this tool with the risk profiling software to, let's say, enhance the organization risk profile with those informations. One thing regarding occurrence reporting that we've already, let's say, we know that when scoring the complexity, we can easily see that an organization might have occurrence reporting issues because it is as complex as another one, but we don't receive as much occurrence reports as the other one. And this is a sign, maybe, that the occurrence reporting system is not working properly. So there's lots of things we can do with a risk profile, but we need to be careful because we are still learning this process. And we, as I said previously, it's still decision aid at this stage. And we're not there to, the tool is not there to dictate what we have to do. But that's a very valid point. Occurrence reports should be used to as a very valid data to derive an organization risk profile. Third question. I know that EASA as a competent authority, right? EASA is the competent authority in the initial airworthiness. So EASA also uses a tool for their initial airworthiness risk-based oversight. Did you try it before developing your own prototype? Did they share their tool to national competent authorities? I think that what you have in mind is the level of involvement we have in Part 21G. Yes, EASA is using a risk-based approach in initial airworthiness, but the LOI, the level of involvement, is here to address the risk of non-compliance at the product level, not necessarily at the organization level. When you design an aircraft, you need to demonstrate that your design complies to technical requirements, the certification specifications. The LOI is here to address the risk of non-compliance to these technical requirements and not to Part 21G, which is the regulation applicable to the organization. But apart from that, it's exactly the same principle. And yes, we went through those principles. We went through Part 21G regulation, AMC and guidance, which are very detailed on LOI to ensure that our system, even if the risk which is addressed is not exactly the same, it's both are addressing a risk of non-compliance, but one is focused on the product, the other one is focused on the organization. And I can reassure you that apart from vocabulary differences, the principles are the same. Last question for me, regarding the explanation to move from severity to complexity. It was explained that the risk of a non-compliance is more severe in an organization maintaining 200 aircraft compared to an organization maintaining 10 aircraft. Is severity really increased, or is it not the likelihood which increases? Very good point and very interesting one. This is why developing those tools is complex. It's very, very easy to make mistakes, and there are lots of traps, lot of traps, and misleading between performance, probability, and severity is one of those traps. And you're right, we might think that, all right, the more aircraft I have, the higher is the probability that I make a mistake. But then, yeah, I think we are not objective if we say this, because if you are really good, it's not because you have 200 aircraft that you will do a mistake. However, even if you are really good, if you do a mistake, if you have 200 aircraft, whatever you do, and this is what EASA called intrinsic risk, if you have 200 aircraft, the potential severity is higher. Okay, so you're right that it's complex and it's easy that's an open subject, an open question. We can discuss this, and I understand your point, but when you address a risk, you should always keep in mind that two aspects have to be taken into account. We cannot say that an organization with 200 aircraft is more risky than an organization with 10 aircraft, because it depends on the performance. If you are really good, you might be less risky than an organization with 200 aircraft. With your, well, what I want to say is that if you only address the performance, it's not enough to speak about risk. And if you only address the complexity, it's not enough to speak about risk. Even if you are complex, if you are really performant, really good, you are not risky. And an organization with 200 aircraft can be less risky than an organization with only 10 aircraft, because the performance of the one with 10 aircraft is low and the performance of the one with 200 is high. But this being said, if an non-compliance occurs, the severity is potentially higher with the 200 aircraft, even if you perform well. All right, and I think that's it. Wow, it's 7:29. So we are 1 minute ahead of the schedule. I don't know if there is last minute questions. I'm just going through the chat. I don't know, do we stop there, or I think we can stop there. As I said at the beginning, all the questions that we cannot address now because we are running out of time, we'll have a look through them, and for some of them, the most interesting one, we will provide the written answers. Of course, I thank you all for your attention. Erwan, I think you do the same.
Thanks a lot for your attention, and please feel free to ask some more. We will treat all the new questions after.
All right. Thank you very much,
Thanks
everyone.
a lot.